Well, I'd like to welcome Ifrah Mansour to our classroom. And I met Ifrah when she had a show at the Museum of Art in Minnesota. It's, well, is it the Museum of Art, or is it a different name for that large museum?
Minneapolis Institute of Art.
Institute of Art.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonderful museum if you've never been there. And I saw Ifrah's work and I met her, and she agreed to bring her installation to Drake. Well, how many years has it been? Every year I keep thinking we'll be doing this exhibit and we keep having to postpone it, but it's finally happening. Ifrah is also going to be zooming in on early November. I think it's November 3rd when we're down in the gallery, and she'll help us install the exhibit, her section of the exhibit at that time, because she won't be in town. She is doing her play in the UK. And so she's a performance artist and has lots of things going on. And I think since the time she committed to showing her work here, her star has just risen. And so we're very fortunate that she's making time for us in her schedule.
I'm a mixed media artist. That's kind of what I'm called. I just feel like that's like a fancy way of saying that I like to tell a story in as many art genre forms as possible. I love it when the audience or the being, whoever's looking at it, is like engulfed and like held by the story or by my chosen topics. Um, I feel like I thrive more in like non-traditional artistic spaces, not museums, although I've had the privilege of being, at museums. I just love it when the space is unartistic, whether it's like an alleyway or a parking lot or a backyard. So I kind of want to share photos that often are not on my social media, that are just, I have it somewhere tucked away because they're just so, dear to me. Uh, for me, like I felt like I started my art journey on stage and like professional theater stage, and some of these images are like my like OG first time being on stage, doing the character with the most, and sort of also like my introduction to utilizing where I come from, what I come with, whether it's like my ancestors' history, or what I know or what I don't know. This is like a piece of just sort of like, reimagining what would it look like if the present and the past were meeting together. And this piece that I am kind of wearing it as a garment is a very traditional, milk container. And I'd wanted to sort of like speak on this this feeling of being removed from your culture when you grow up elsewhere, to a point that you are the one who would be disrespecting and misappropriating your own culture because you didn't grow up with the knowledge of it. So it was a comical piece. I enjoyed being whatchamacallit, an idiot Somali, as I called myself. Yeah. This is another performance piece. Again, I grew up in America most of my life. I lived outside of my country, so part of that journey of growing up away from your culture is also um, losing, but also yearning for pieces of your culture that you could have easily had, whether it's, speaking Somali fluently. This is the first time I made a poem that was in English and in Somali. For me, it's like one of the nerve-wracking performance I have ever done, because I'm performing for a full Somali audience that are extremely conservative, know they're Somali, know they're everything, and here I am, messing up Somali grammar. So this performance is dear to me because it gave me just a little bit of confidence to like say, hey, I can do this, and I have the yearning to learn more. And this is also another piece that I've done. It's a kind of a posh photography version of it, but it's my interest in like self-history, self-knowledge continues to be deeper. This is a piece called Somalia's Balloon, and it's also about it's speaking of colonization from a place where what is it, somewhat colonization, explaining colonization to a child, if you can imagine it. So the idea of like taking a balloon from a child or taking a candy from a child just felt so inspirational to me. And I made a whole piece about how Somalia was colonized by four different countries that has even till this day has such a deep impact on our history and on our identity formation as well. This is my, after I just got my feet fully wet in the arts and in the stage, this became my first visual arts and sculptural and what is it, a mixed media, and thus my interest in like creating work with fabric. And as you'll recognize, this is the fabric that I use in the installation that y'all get to be part of. This is called what is it Lub Lub, the Spill. And it made a connection between hospitality here in America and hospitality in Somalia, and this bizarre commonality that we have of being generous towards milk. Yeah, here we go. I think you'll see, once again, you'll see my favorite cultural item called the deal, which is a milk. It's a hand carved milk container. And this container is just so fascinating because it's actually used to preserve milk. I don't know for how long, but it's definitely more than a month because the way it's treated on the inside. When I was in Somalia, there is no or was no concept of fridge. So just think about how you would keep food, fresh and preserved. So what people did is that they had these tools and herbs that would keep the food preserved and be edible for a very long time. And this is just a unique cultural ingenious item that I just love to include my works. This also inspired me to start thinking about reusable items. And yeah, let me see. Once I felt like I got a good glimpse of the fancy world of being staged, I wanted to go back to my own community, because oftentimes, as an artist of color, I feel like I make this beautiful thing and it's often not consumed by my people. So it made me go back to my roots. And this is when I said that I now feel more accomplished, or I just feel fed when I do work specifically for the community. This is just kids like painting a trash can, and they just went nuts at it. They painted on top of each other, and I just loved it. Everyone got on it. Just so beautiful. There's more. This is another community collaboration where you are often working with not just elders, but kids who are removed from their culture and who aren't given any arts opportunity. So we literally made this together, from asking everyone, what do we physically need? people saying that we just need a place to sit in this backyard area, to hey, we want it to be beautiful. And the kids were like, actually, we want it to be sturdy so we can jump off of it. So I love that we took every little note and need into the making. Yeah, what else? And then of course the grandma were like, okay, make the kids, their own, and then but make ours. And this became the grandma's bunch. Yeah. And then of course I went back to my stage creation, and this is another sort of like an inaugural piece of me dabbling in filmmaking or experimental filmmaking. And again, still using uh, my inspiration for knowing very little about my culture. Once again, I am interacting with artifacts in a way that I feel like is bizarre and foreign. It's almost kind of like, you know, uh, you know, you know, uh, dating your history and choosing, you know, if you even have the ability to choose yourself history, the parts that you feel connected and the parts you don't want to connect with. Yeah, this is again, it's full all in Somali. It's never been translated. I hope to never translate it. So all the audience that have seen it, I just felt like there was some kind of understanding, some kind of transformation that happened. And I just love that pieces, even as an arts lover myself, I love it when pieces aren't translated, when they're in a different language. I just feel like our brains were designed to just love diversity in language and in thoughts, if we allow it. This is sort of like an up close shot. Once again, you'll see kind of like this cultural fabric that I like to use, and sort of trying to make it my fabric symbol in most of my work. This is another beloved piece. In interrogating and trying to understand more about my culture, I got really fascinated in how Somali huts are made, and learning about my ancestors were once, nomadic and lived, throughout the country, and they moved around. And with that, they found this ingenious way of building a tent all from nature, and all that is just in harmonious and taking very little in the planet. So I just love that very minimalistic living of life, and it made me want to reimagine and making that. This was my little fancy connection to an adorable film that was created about Minneapolis. I got to, even though my face got to be in it, my favorite part was that the filmmaker was just so sweet and just wanted to share his process in all aspiring arts makers. So I got to really work on the script and see the script in development. So I kind of love that part more than acting. But the acting was great. Yeah, and this film is, I believe, is available on Amazon Prime. It's available on the internet if you'd like to see it. It celebrates Minneapolis. Unfortunately, with what has happened to us within the last 2 years, what I love that this film actually has now, these maybe historic footages that those places are completely different because of what has happened. I love that this film and other films that have been captured about Minneapolis sort of shows that it captures a city before, yeah, before the unrest. This is another piece in my journey to create a Somali hut. I am trying to learn how to make puppets, and by weaving, by using how my ancestors would have made a hut. So this is another beloved puppet that is has multiple functions, but is always curious about healing, and how do people heal in in different communities. And within that, there's like things that you can see on the inside. And I just love the way that this kid was taking pictures of it. There we go. And folks would get to like, you know, imagine what healing is to them, and then they would create this, you know, shell art, and there, you know, there'd be a photo of their hands, and then you can see it inside Halima. This would be a photo that you could see inside Halima, and then everyone gets to see other people's image of healing in their hands. Yeah. And then off, this is another puppet that I've made for the play that we are touring out in London. Her name is Grandma. Grandma is very fancy and kind of high maintenance because I travel with the head of Grandma and then I build the butt. We call the rest of the puppet the butt. So literally, you'll hear me like, you know, nonchalantly saying, what you call it, how do we harvest Grandma's butt, because we don't want to build her twice. So those are like the conversations you would hear at our production meetings, which I just love that. uh this is a still shot from the play How to Have Fun in a Civil War. Yeah, and I can share a little bit about this play. This is a again, in like interrogating, learning, deepening, understanding, and seeking self-healing, community healing, cultural healing, collective healing, is what came out of this play. This play is about how children experience war, trauma, specifically about how children are impacted by forced migration. So the play uh, talks about the Somali history or the Somali Civil War, how we came about, um, and the the play is told from a kid's vantage point, and um, I feel like that's what the world has fell in love, and it's just been really beautiful to have the opportunity to present this play in multiple places. And as horrid as war is, it's extremely constant in our lives. Even as we speak, there, children in Ukraine, children in what you call it, Palestinians that are growing up and that are being impacted by never-ending wars. So it's been bizarrely beautiful to just be asked to do this play because of how unfortunately common the impact of war on children is. And then this is the piece that y'all will have the beautiful magic of being part of it and installing it. It's called Can I Touch It? It is the piece that brought me and Lenore together
Yeah.
eons ago, before before we knew this thing called COVID. Um and yeah, this piece was inspired by, unfortunately, a personal experience that I had of, you know uh you know uh whatchamacallit, I was hanging out at a bar. There was a time where I had my hair out, and this man wanted to touch my hair, and he had like macho hands, and he just went at it from my for my hair. And that experience has stuck with me, and it's the experience that inspired me to create this piece. And I just yeah, it's a piece that I feel like every time I install it, it changes, it morphs, it moves. um I love that there's an opportunity for maybe others to make it. I feel like there's definitely an element of healing as I am like weaving this fabric that can easily be messed up. And one funny thing, it was a the ins you know um at Mia. It was supposed to be there for, I think, 8 months. They extended it, and by the time it was done, there were so many signs that said, "Please don't touch it," because for some reason the museum people were touching it so much, and I would come in every now and then to sort of fix it up. So it's just been really interesting, even as in a sculptural piece, that it had this other life where it needed to be guarded. I just imagine that for, the being itself. And I'm like, should we all be walking around with a sign of "Please don't touch it"? Um, for me, sometimes I use humor as part of my healing tool. This is one of the pieces that I feel like it's humorless, but in some ways there's this, yeah, I don't know. There's also this. For me, like, it felt humorous for the piece's audio to be, can I touch it constantly? And then there were actual signs protecting it, saying, "Please don't touch it." It just felt like we're being so contradictive. And I feel like that's sort of, the thing with violence, that it's so contradicting, confusing. I'm curious, since we are a small group and we've got like time with each other. I'm curious if you just like connected with things, or if you also had like, similar moments like I did, where you were like, "Oh, I've had like, you know privacy violation," but in the moment maybe you didn't think about it. Because for me, I didn't think about it in the moment. I'm like, "Oh, this person's answered." I didn't think about it because they're in there. So I'm curious if y'all have like something that sort of, woke up for you, um or a moment where you just felt like, "Oh, you know my privacy was being violated, but I didn't really think about it."
Hi. Yeah, mine is kind of like a two-parter, I guess. I've definitely had those experiences where I've been out, or just like, especially growing up. I grew up in an area that's like predominantly white. So when people would touch my hair in that moment, I wouldn't really think much about it until like, honestly, it took a couple years to like really process of like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize like, why were these people touching my hair as if it was like some type of like, I don't know,
Yeah.
like foreign object or something. Like it's not something that you just get to touch. So like I definitely resonated with that. And that's why I chose your piece for the installment that we're doing here. And so I also have another question of, I noticed in the piece that there was like an eye holographic there. Why did you choose that to be there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the eye, I feel like sometimes, can I tell you a funny story? So the museum just took like bunch of babies in there to see it. And all the questions that I got was like, "So where's the nose? When are we gonna get a giant nose?" So I'm supposed to be making a "Can I touch it too" with a nose at some point. um, I'm just I'm also really curious about the gaze as well, because what I think about is like what is going in the violator person's mind as they are maybe like politely asking for a permission but still going for the violation.
Mhm.
um and what about all the times they actually don't touch, but they ask all these intrusive, bizarre, unkind, inhumane questions? um I think for me, like as a hijabi wearer, I'd have like a slew of other questions of like, do you need a special, laundry machine to wash it? How long do you wash it? And so I'm just really curious about the gaze as well, in addition to the physical violation, and the eye just being there. Because what's interesting is like, why not just look? Why can't look just be enough? That's also a like, I mean, the other beings that get violated are pregnant humans, people with tattoos, people with scars. And I'm also like, now I'm curious if it's an American thing that does this, or is it a global? Yeah.
Sometimes I think it's like an American thing, specifically like an American white thing for like constantly having to like touch something. I think it's like the idea of like a fixation of something that they don't have. So like they want to touch it, but like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I've always wondered the same thing too, like why? But
Yeah.
yeah. I also have another,
Oh, can I just ask a question to both of you?
Yeah.
Or to everyone? Is this gendered at all? Do men ask more to touch hair than women, or do white women do this as much?
I don't know. I feel like for me, a lot of my experiences come from like white women. Like it's been very rare that like men, like I guess I'll just use black men because that, yeah, anyways, that black men have like asked to touch my hair. Like that's never really happened ever. So like it's primarily been like my white like peers, like people that like I go to school with or like that I like am friends with. They'd be like, oh, you got a new hairstyle, or like, oh, you changed your hair. Can I touch it? And so I'm like, why do you need to touch it? You just observed that I got a new hairstyle. That should be plenty. But
Yeah.
That gives me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
You had a question.
Yeah, I had another question. So with your artwork, I really like how you went back into the community to like build the bench and stuff like that. So I was just curious, like, do you ever find it difficult with connecting with like older generations of the Somalian population? Because like my parents are Nigerian immigrants. So like I was just thinking of like that connection of like taking them to like an art gallery, and then like would they like do you ever struggle with finding that like medium of connecting with like younger people versus the older generation?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think sometimes it's like, you make this beautiful piece of work and, only maybe the young generation would come, but then your target audience is older generation, especially about, telling your own, history and teaching your history to the next generation. I feel like all of those artistic work would benefit if the elders are there, because the elders are historians. And what's interesting is that the elders will just look at you and they'll look, they'll label you as Americanized. I used to wear pants, and Muslims allegedly were not supposed to wear pants. I didn't get that memo, so I've been wearing pants. I still wear pants. And yeah, and I think for me, like I just felt like I immersed myself in the elders world without having to change. They would literally bring me like skirts to wear in class, because I used to volunteer in an elders what is it classroom. These elders that are learning English, and they would literally they would bring me skirts, they would bring me a scarf, and I was like, thank you so much, but I'm gonna continue to wear these pants. And for me, like I just feel like I build that relationship, but they're so hard. They're so hard. Um and sometimes like I understand why they're hard. I understand why they're silent. Because they live with so much trauma, and there's this believe that if you talk about it, like the trauma is like a bug. It'll jump off of you, it'll go into your next generation, and then your next generation are going to be as peaceless as you were. So like I feel like I learned so much. I learned why they are the way they are. And sometimes like the biggest takeaway is like to let them be. And sometimes you'll get like few soft moments, like even some of these photos, most of my like treasured works can't be photographed because they will not let me take photos, even though like they trust me, they know. Another ways that I feel like BIPOC communities are violated is like people take a lot of negative images of us to prove a point. So our community doesn't even want to take a picture to prove a good point, whether us like coming together to talk about something to improve our communities, or us coming together to build an art piece, to hang out with the kids. So it's sometimes it's what's really interesting is how this is kind of like, intersectional. A lot of immigrants, I feel like we're bonding over how our, our elders kind of shun us. And then we come together, we're like, yo, I'm being abused by our own elders. What's your strategy? And for me, like I really look up to the Native American communities here that have such a like deep connection with their elders. You'll go to a powwow and you'll see the most eldest person dancing with the littlest person, and it's just so beautiful, and you just want to like soak up and learn and listen. So I love that this cross cultural disconnect might be creating some interesting intersectional work. And I got to be part of a little bit of that, where diverse communities are coming together, whether it is to reimagine a world without policing, or to support our kids that are dealing with not only gun violence, but the opioid crisis. So it's kind of interesting. The need for elders is so deep, and sometimes you have to, I feel like you have to shift your tactics to their ways, and their ways being sometimes, I need 2 decades to be silent. Low-key. Yeah. But yeah, I hope I sound hopeful. I hope I'm not like disencouraging you. Yeah, but a lot of times I just felt like if I just show up and be in their presence, regardless of how they feel about me, sometimes I feel like it's a slow, long-term relationship. Yeah.
That's true. I really like how you were able to kind of create like a crossroads of being some like staying in tune with your Somali culture and also being American, because I feel like oftentimes it feels like you can only be one or the other, but I just find that really cool. So
yeah, I just think about if somebody were to like drop me in Somalia, right, how useless I would be to save myself. I'm like, yo, I'm dying because I didn't see snow for like 7. Sometimes places change. Change. Yeah.
So have you found yourself to be more, I guess, in touch? Well, have you always worn your hijabi, or were there times where you would like phases where you would versus where you wouldn't? Because I know it's a very it is a very personal thing. So like I understand like if you don't want to share, but I was just curious if times.
No, no, this is this is exactly why I made this piece, especially right now. We're watching what's happening in Iran, and the ways in which how the hijab has been used as symbol of forced power. It's unfortunate because in the religion it's supposed to be a symbol of dedication, a symbol between you and God. But I think, as always, men use things to abuse women. So I just watched the video of these 2 Iranian girls, especially not wearing their hijab, to make a powerful statement. And I think so for me, like I feel like while I grew up here, and there's this American journey or diaspora journey that one goes through, whether it is you go through a period where you're made to feel what you'll come with is disgusting, terrorist, unsafe, and you just feel like maybe letting go and hiding and assimilating is the safe and secure way to exist in America. And there are others that are just like, hey, I'm just having a human experience, and I want to feel the wind in my skull. And I felt like that was my journey. I just wanted to feel the wind in my hair, and I did that. I needed 2 decades for the winter. I still do every now and then. But I think this, this hijab thing is such a deeply personal thing, but it can also be such a political tool, like what's literally currently happening right now in Iran. And it's interesting, like every Muslim woman that you talk to will have a different response. Um, and yeah, and I just feel like maybe that's the beauty of faith, that it gets to be different, it gets to be personal, it gets to be just for you. And no man and law should come between you and how you wear your scarf. And it's interesting, like even like trying to understand the Crowns Act and the ways in which African Americans here, their hair was their hair was politicized.
Yeah.
There was an actual law that prevented people from literally existing. And I just it's bizarre, because you think about, it's bizarre, you think about if someone were to do the opposite, someone were to say, hey, X and XO, if we, every blonde person, this is what will happen to you. It's because then, I don't know, in some ways it feels like people can make the inhumane argument if you would apply the oppression to the mainstream people. And oftentimes I feel like that courtesy has not been given. It was also a recent right that the Crowns Act, which allows people to wear their hair whatever way they want without not being shunned professionally. That was just very recent. So sometimes I like to just understand, even though I feel like I'm having this, teeny, maybe only Muslim girl can relate to, like this huge global issue about the ways in which women's body has always been politicized and used as part of, power struggle and power grab. Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm
No,
gonna come down from the pedestal right now. Coming down.
No, I was definitely following. I think it's a constant battle, especially as Black women, where it's like these issues have always been happening to us, and then it's like they only become like taken to like the legislature room when it's like reversed and it's happening towards white people.
Very
So
much.
like I feel like especially
Yes.
like if a blonde hair girl's hair was being cut in a school, like that law would have been passed after the first time. So it's always difficult to like battle with the fact of like this has been happening. We've been like confined for centuries in contrast to like, so it's definitely a
Yeah.
constant battle. But yeah, just really love your artwork. So it's been amazing to talk to you.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you.
Yes.
I have an experience that I'm curious if you personally resonate with. For reasons I don't entirely understand, my hair has been like, people have asked to touch my hair all throughout my life, which is odd because I'm white and like my hair is straight. Like it's always like white women and white men asking me this, and I didn't entirely like understand why it made me feel weird for so long. But like they know what my hair feels like because they know what their hair feels like. Like they felt their own hair. And there was even one man at one point who refused to stop touching my hair repeatedly over the course of like days because he knew it upset me. And so I came to the realization, or at least the conclusion, that people, it's not always out of ignorance or out of just like naivete. It can be like at least, at the very least, an unconscious or subconscious way of asserting dominance or like this like elevated status of personhood. And I started to realize this is actually the way that people treat and talk to dogs and like animals that they find endearing or cute. I think in general, also the way that the question is always phrased, it's always phrased, can I touch it? It's never phrased, can I touch your hair? Because the phrase your hair implies a connection to personhood, whereas it is sort of seen as an inherently dehumanizing term. It implies that the thing you're touching is an object, which is not, objects are not considered as related to people except in terms of possession. So when I hear people say, can I touch it, in terms of like my hair, it always feels like they're seeing me as like an object or like as a lower status of person or human from them. And I don't entirely understand the reasons why that is, but I'm curious if that resonates with you and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. As I was listening to you, I was just thinking about this whole human conditioning that we have of the zoo. And because that is like our human conditioning. As humans, we are, the toppest predator. Just feel like nobody's on top of us. Maybe Rona right now, like Corona might be on top of us, but we're really up there. And this whole idea of just like capturing and for pure entertainment and for pure curiosity, that we get to violate another creature. I feel like that's unfortunately part of our human DNA. Because I also have to like retrain myself when I'm curious about someone. Like I remember the first time I saw a monk person, I was just so fascinated. I'm like, it's so cold, and this person has an exposed arm and a nipple. How is this possible? I was going for the can I touch it? and I think like, you would think that my own human experience of being violated, would inspire me to pause, and it did for me at least. But a lot of us, I just feel like we have that in us, and it is sort of up to us in how we quench our curiosity of the difference of the unknown. Because essentially, when you like decode why we're doing this, why we engage this violence, is to say maybe our purest need is to be curious about this other person. We're just curious that your hair is different. We're just curious how your hair is like this. And if we just only touch it, maybe the curiosity will get fed. But within that act, we're violating another human being. And I always think about like we're leaving our bacteria in this other human being as well. And just thinking about that just gives me a little visceral. Yeah, I'm so sorry what happened to you. And it's unfortunate, like, that yeah, just thinking about like how pregnant woman, like no one can touch my belly right now, but if I put a baby in there, like my belly becomes an instant public property. That also just intrigues me. And yeah, I feel like you have such a deep observation about it, that it's just been beautiful to hear, out loud. And I just feel like it's more, perhaps it is this unconsciousness of being curious, but feeding our curiosity in a violent way. And now it's like becoming aware of this curiosity and feeding it in a way where it's kind and mutually respectable. Now I think about the people who have been like really curious about my scarf, or really curious about the ways in which my hair just stands on its own. And just like thinking about, hi, there is a healthy, kind way of getting to know another human being, getting to know another culture.
I really agree with that. Thank you.
If I could add a little to this conversation, when I was in high school, I had a summer job and it was working on a stop action film, and that was in Evanston. And I would part of the time move these little figures by increments for the stop action people, but they also had a live portion where they were doing a bus safety stop action film, and they had children on a bus, and the children were about 6 years old, and they would wait for their time to be in the film. And I was also the person who would play with the children during this long interim so that they would stay calm. And one of the things that sort of became a routine was I was like the star among some of the younger Black children, the girls who loved, I had hair almost down to my waist, and they would love to braid it. And so we would spend the hour or so having my hair put into multiple braids. They wanted to touch my hair. So when I hear you and Sam, and all of you talking about about hair and touching it and the violence versus curious. I think you're absolutely right when you say that there's a human element of curiosity. And it reminds me of the title of our exhibit, which is A Thin but Powerful Difference, Race, Embodiment. And the violence comes from the society's idea of race, racializing things. But embodiment is something that comes from people, like you said, just being human, having human curiosity. So it feels like it's hard to separate the two necessarily, but that's what we're really trying to do in this exhibit. When is it violence and when is it embodiment? They're two very different types of power. So one is power that's thrust upon you, like Sam, you were talking about, and you were talking about Metrick-Chen. And one is the power that comes from being a human being. So that's what I thought. This just really leads us to see what we're doing even more clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love the diversity of experiences. Yeah, and the ways in which we can be connected in someone else's like story or someone